everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Karen with the Rugger's Edge. I'm really excited for you to join us, and also our very special panelists to talk a little bit about, just some updates that's happening with collegiate rugby, especially with the three, top women's programs in the country. We've got Roz from Life University, we've got Billy from Lindenwood, and Trevor from Central Washington. So I'm so thankful for you all to take some time this evening to chat with us, and also chat with all of our families that are joining us from all over the US. I'm so excited to see these all these cities and states and all these students that are joining. So what we're going to do, just so everyone who is joining us understands, just a little bit of housekeeping. I definitely have an agenda of some things I'm going to lead the coaches through, answering some of the common questions that were submitted prior to this session. But please feel free as we're going along, if you have specific questions, go ahead and throw it into the chat, and we will get to it if it feels like it's organic to our conversation and won't kind of lead us too far into a tangent. But certainly this evening is for you. So for the parents, for the student athletes that are on the call, this is really your time to ask questions of these amazing coaches, hear from them directly about what's happening in their programs, or for as you're kind of going through the process of deciding where you want to go to continue playing college rugby. There are definitely some things I'm going to want you to think about, and I'm sure all these coaches will share as well. So I think to kick things off, what I'd love is maybe we'll just kind of go around the horn right now, and just Roz, will start with you, and then we'll go to Billy, and then Trevor. If you want to just give us a little bit, a snippet about yourself, about your program, and then maybe, if possible, something that students or families wouldn't know about your college that you can share, or something that is maybe a myth about what your college is like or what it's not like, something that they would know just by looking at the website.
Sure. So I'm Rosalind Chou, and I'm the head coach at Life University, and I've been the coach since the program's inception in 2014. A little bit about myself. I grew up in the South. I played rugby at Florida State, and then went on to play and have a long club career playing Premier League for the Harlequins here in Atlanta. And just the fact that the biggest misconception about Life University is that we only are a chiropractic school. So everyone thinks, oh, that's that chiropractic school, when in fact we have 14 different undergraduate majors now, largely in the health sciences, but also in business and computer information management. So I've actually had some graduates go on and get really great jobs with their business degrees in psychology, in biology, and as computer programmers. So we do offer a bit more than what meets the eye when people think, oh, it's just a chiropractic school.
Great, wonderful. And then is there just maybe a little, could you share a little bit about the rugby program, like how long the women's program's been around?
Since 2014.
Okay.
And we're full varsity, so we're under athletics at Life University, and we're known for our obnoxious kit. We're in lime, bright, streaky green, and it, in terms of just, we're in the D1 elite with the rest of these coaches, and just more than anything, I love coaching the team, and we're all about growth on and off the field.
Wonderful, thank you. Billy, what about you?
Started rugby in New York with Old Blue, both playing with their men's program there and starting their first women's sevens program that kicked off at Club Sevens quite a long time ago. And then after that, moved to St. Charles, Missouri, where I've been for the past 6.5 years. So 6.5 now. Couple of facts about Lindenwood for us. I would say one fact that people might not know by looking at our program is that we are represented as the rugby program by 20 different states and 7 different countries. So we really pride ourselves on having diversity on our team with people from all over, and truly being a place where, home away from home, because everybody's kind of, moving here from out of state and, going through that same experience together at the same time. Also about the school, we offer 85 different undergraduate majors. So we've got a wide variety of things that people might be interested in studying in. Even though we do have that many undergraduate majors, we still kind of keep our class size to about 20 to 1. So still a good learning environment, being able to establish connections with your professors and get help when you need it. Specifically about the rugby program, 2012 started as a very small Division II program, and have slowly, gradually built ourselves up to where we are today, and being in the likes of our other two programs here in Penn State and BYU, and some very nice, healthy competition that we all have, playing at the highest level for USA Rugby, and great support by the university varsity program here. So we've got the support of the athletic department as well. So
great. Awesome. And Trevor, what about you? If you can fill everyone in a little bit about Central Washington.
For sure. Yeah. So I don't sound like it, but I was born in South Africa. I moved to Nebraska when I was 10, which is not a normal or natural transition for most people. I like to joke around saying I moved there for the weather, and everyone gives me a funny look. I'm like, it's a joke. Anyways, yeah, so I went to college at Nebraska as well. I was a collegiate All-American. I went on to a brief run with the US Sevens team, represented them in Fiji before my body decided it was time to hang up the boots. I did get another run in with Seattle. Again, body said no more. So during that time, I worked for Serevi for a little bit of time. Now is Atavis, but it used to be called Serevi. Worked at the Institute of Rugby as well. I've coached numerous levels, high school, little kids, all the way to work with some national teams, and Bermuda national team, men's, women. I just love coaching. I'm very passionate about it. Never thought I'd be able to actually make a career of it, to be honest. It was just something that I just loved doing. And before you knew it, I found myself as an assistant coach for the men's team here at Central. And then a year after that, a position opened up with the women's program. And yeah, here we are today. So be very, very fortunate, very grateful. I think all of us can acknowledge that rugby in general, this country has grown at such a rapid rate, but especially on the women's side of things. And I feel very privileged to be able to coach the ladies that do, and to be associated with these coaches here. Some things about our program: we became a club. The team first was founded in '91 as a club team. It transitioned to varsity around 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. It became NCAA. So we are full varsity. We're in the athletic department, full support of the university, faculty as well. We all have faculty affiliates. So we have professors attached to our program. We are considered the most diverse university in the state, which is quite a statement considering you have some of the big universities here in Washington. So we're very proud of that. And it's reflective in our team, similar to Billy and I'm sure Roz as well. We have a very diverse team all over the world, all over the states. And that's also reflected in their interests as well. So we have a very wide array of majors. You can do everything from, we have a world-renowned geology program, all the way to, if you want to be a beer brewer, we have that program too. We have, if you want to become a sommelier, we have wine studies. Like we have such a plethora of degree programs that really has something for just about anybody.
Great, wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you all are here. I definitely have a lot of stuff to get through, because there were a lot of questions that got submitted. But I think one of the things obviously on everyone's mind, and I'm sure you've been dealing with it as well, is, and I don't know if you want to mix it up or if you all want to just kind of, say you want to start, but kind of what has this current season looked like, during the pandemic, have you been able to practice, or what does it look like on your campus? And maybe a little bit of, I know none of us can really, have a crystal ball and see what's going to happen, but are there, what you're looking ahead at for maybe this next semester on your campus and with your team, just to kind of set the stage? Because I know there's definitely a lot of questions about recruiting, but I think in order to get to where recruiting is, we kind of need to see what's actually happening with your team and, what's happening on your campus. So maybe we go the other way. I don't know, Trevor, do you want to start first? And sorry, Billy, you'll be in the middle for now. Then we'll switch it up. So Trevor, do you want to kick us off with that?
Sure. So being a state-based state university in a state that's, let's be honest, is more restrictive than most, which is probably why we have a better grasp on things. And it's less spikes, if you will. But things have been relatively strict, and it's definitely been a learning curve for everybody. So we actually haven't been able to do any actual contact this entire school year. We're just grateful to honestly just be out there running around and working on run, catch, pass theory and fitness, things like that. So it's been a bit of a challenge in that way, but we're very excited. I know our players are chomping at the bit to get going here. February 1st, we're allowed to start doing contact, but we've had to maintain, distancing while training, wear masks while we train. Thankfully, we've had very few outbreaks or any sort of issues with that, but it's everywhere. So it's required a lot of diligence on everyone's part and our players as well. But if anything, I think it's highlighting a lot of good things in people. It's also highlighting a lot of bad things in people, let's be honest. But I think as a whole, I think people are really coming out of this. They're going to be a lot stronger mentally. And I think we're learning some really good habits and probably learning a lot more about pandemics than we ever would otherwise. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We're just kind of waiting on final word from the university president if we can move forward with everything. But yeah, we're on track.
Okay, great. And Billy, what about you? Oh, I think you're muted somehow. Oh, there you go.
First one, got it. I think we'll probably all share some of the same similarities in our training setups, but for us specifically, we were able to practice a bit in the fall. Obviously, it was a bit modified. Again, same thing, encouraging distance trainings. Didn't really get into much contact, mask wearing pretty much throughout our entire session. Having kind of specific pods that we're training in, just to kind of reduce numbers as far as contact tracing goes. And then on top of that, we're doing 25% randomized COVID testing every 2 weeks. We've done that in the fall and we'll continue to do that throughout the spring as well, depending on what our season will look like. I would say for us, a big focus, has been on small group development or individual skill development and just enabled us to really take some time to focus on technique and mechanics versus kind of more big picture structured gameplay. So that's kind of been a nice mix up. It'll be nice to transition back into some full team stuff and to some match play as well. But at the end of the day, I think all of our seasons got cut short along with the rest of the world last March. So, just being able to kind of transition into that mode of just appreciating it and being grateful for being out there and getting to interact with your friends and your teammates and the players we get to coach has been kind of, something that I think, at least I know, kind of took advantage of the ability to do that because we didn't think anything was going to come up. So I think just kind of also working on, our mindset has been a big thing for us as well, and our ability to adapt and kind of persevere and continue to train and enjoy it through all this.
So far, so is it right now hope like starting to maybe plant the seeds for maybe some games in the spring? Is that kind of the hope with both of your?
February 20th, Life is supposed to play Lindenwood.
Oh.
So, and you'll be able to watch the broadcast if it goes through, everybody. I do recommend that happening.
Great. Okay. All right, Roz, your turn.
Okay, so 50 states, 50 different approaches to how things are done. So I will say that Georgia is the first state that opened up. And being that we're in Georgia, our school has its own policies, athletics wise, where we're phased in how we can train. So we starting with phase 0 with everybody coming in and getting tested. And then as those results come in, moving to phase 1 in separated pods and not sharing equipment. We moved to phase 2, which is in bigger groups at the same time, but still separated, which then we moved to phase, what they called 2.5, where we could all be together and play against each other for 15 minutes. And then phase 3, we did make it all the way to phase 3 in the fall, and we're actually able to play the local Atlanta Harlequins. And we were able to have everybody at practice, and including having contact, full on contact. So we do know that, obviously our state and a lot of the South has different guidelines than other parts of the country. So we did do that. And any sports team would be brought down to phase 0 if they had 10% of their roster testing positive. So a roster of 50 like ours, we would have to have 5 positives at once to shut down to 0. And so, we were lucky that didn't happen at all in the fall. And we started skills yesterday, yes, today's Wednesday, yesterday, and they have skill session tomorrow. As long as they've had to be tested within 72 hours of training beginning. That includes staff and coaches as well, all staff and coaches as well. And so those that have their test back have gone to the skill session that started Tuesday. More will have their results back Thursday, and then full team training starts Monday. So we are in preparation to play Billy's team, in about a month.
Wow, that's
So.
great. I think everyone is just so like hopeful, we're like, just give us some rugby, like however that happens. Okay, there's a smattering of questions, but I might want to back up a little bit, because I know that in all of your introductions, you mentioned being a full varsity team, being under athletics, and this is a common question I get. And I don't know if one of you wants to just share what, someone asked, what's the difference between your varsity versus the NIRA NCAA varsity, which I'm going to have another webinar Monday about. Is there a difference? Can you explain that? Is one better? I think there's definitely, unfortunately, so much confusion out there, right? So I don't know if someone wants to start or feels comfortable.
I'm happy to start.
Okay.
So now we are distinguishing NIRA versus non-NIRA because Trevor is NCAA. All of the NIRA schools do have an NCAA affiliation. That doesn't mean, like Trevor doesn't have to be in NIRA, so he's not, his team is not. And there are 3 tiers to NIRA. So Division III doesn't offer scholarships, but they can have financial aid packages. Their Division II has a mixture where they can do financial aid packages and some tuition assistance. And even in Division I of NIRA, the Ivy Leagues can have great financial packages, but they can't give athletic scholarships. So even within NIRA, probably your webinar, when you have there, you'll have to be explaining all the differences in NIRA, because it's not cookie cutter in NIRA. And so the same goes for us in our division. So the 3 of us all can give a particular amount of financial help. So that is across the board for the 3 on this call. While we do have Penn State as part of our league, they can't offer any financial help, but they can get admission spots for Penn State. So even we're not all uniform in what we're doing, but one major thing I think that makes us stand out as D1 Elite is that we're not restricted. Well, Trevor is going to have to speak for Trevor. I know I always have to have that caveat. Billy, Kate, and I, and BYU with Tom, we don't have competition restrictions. And we don't have recruiting restrictions. So we don't have to wait until they're a certain age to start talking to recruits. And the biggest thing, those competition restrictions, it gives us a chance to, especially if we have bigger rosters, to play a lot of games and play a lot of rugby. Obviously not in COVID, it was cut short, but a conversation with Emily Bidewell, who's the high performance manager for USA Rugby for the women's side, talks about the fact that we don't play enough rugby in the United States, but the fact that we can have games and we can play anybody we want. We can play women's Premier League teams if we want. We could play all-star teams if we want. And we were averaging at Life over 20 15s matches a year. What that does for our players is give them a lot of opportunity to play, a lot of opportunity to get better and develop. And if you see the 3 of us on this panel and then include Kate Daly at Penn State, we do have the most players when it comes to collegiate players in the national team pool or moving on into the national team pool. Obviously Harvard has a long tradition, has quite a few. If we were to think about NIRA sticking out, there's a lot of Harvard players in the mix that I would include, some Dartmouth too, but the high concentration of high performance players at that national team level, 15s and 7s, they're coming from these 3 programs in Penn State. And a large part is that we play each other because we're playing at there. We don't have a lot of disparate competition. It is brutal when we play each other, and brutal close competition makes us better, where no knock on NIRA, but they keep switching their tiers. It was self-selected tier and aligning with NCAA. They're going to have some pretty lopsided games that way, which then their top players don't necessarily get that brutal competition, that really close, hard competition where, a sevens game with Billy, I bet our record against each other split 50-50. 500 down the middle. If you include every sevens games Lindenwood and Life has played against each other, it's got to be 500, and he's just winning the right ones at the end of the national championship. And so
Glad you added that in there, girls.
But except that first one. Anyways, but I think when we think about our division, the ability to have these, we're not limited in roster. Our financial support is all there from all our programs. So when we talk about having international teams, we can kind of even scour the world for really top players and then have our domestic players get to play alongside them, which is a pretty special thing. And I think, the Ivies do that. But you got to get in the Ivy,
Yeah.
So.
Billy, what would you say, for those, and thanks for, I think that's the best explanation I've heard, because I actually have never had someone explain, and I get that question all the time. So that's wonderful that you're able to kind of give us a breakdown about that. For families that are really still, either just starting out this process and looking, or they've been hearing this or that, when you say that you're under the athletics department, which all three of you are, like, Billy, what does that, like, what's the difference of your team being under athletics versus another team that's a club?
Yeah, no, I can kind of start on that. So I would just say it comes from a support level, right? And that goes into a lot of different areas. So whether that's academic support and the resources that we have from, tutors, writing centers, things like that, or that's financial aid support. So, the majority of us are able to give out some sort of aid when it comes to athletic scholarships, or whether it's Trevor as well, in-state versus out-of-state tuition. So there's a lot of different things that we have the ability to offer as fully supported programs that some club sports might not be able to do. So when we use the word varsity, we use it from a support standpoint. We use it from a financial aid standpoint. So I would say those are probably two of the big differences. That also has to do with kind of operational budget that we're given as well, right? As a program that's supported as a varsity program. So, being thankful that we don't have to figure out where our money's going to come from to go and play in a national championship, right? Being thankful that, we can set up a really robust schedule and have a high competition level, and not have to have the student athletes worry about, they've got to go out and fundraise every weekend to be in a high performance environment. I think our biggest thing is wanting our student athletes to focus on school and rugby, right? And not have all those additional stressors. And I think the support that we have as varsity programs kind of enables them to have that mindset.
Great. And then Trevor, I know Roz mentioned, so you are NCAA. So what should students, if they're interested in Central Washington, what should they be aware of that might be different in your process versus the process with Life or Lindenwood?
For sure. Yeah, there's definitely some differences in what they need to do. So without getting too much down a rabbit hole, because we can really go down a rabbit hole on this, there's a lot more steps that have to be followed for us. Like, I don't have my manual with me in my office, but just to be able to recruit players, I have to pass a test on a manual this thick. Like, all the possible scenarios you'd ever imagine if someone could possibly committing a violation have been done by somebody along the way, and we have to be aware of what that is. So, if I see an athlete at a tournament, I'm not allowed to talk to them during competition. Afterwards, I can. But if I learn that they're not yet a junior, I can't actually talk to them. I can say, hello, nice to meet you. Hey, let me know when you're a junior, because I'm not allowed to recruit you until your junior year. You have to be enrolled in the NCAA eligibility center. And there's a fee with that. If money's tight with the family, you can always get a fee waiver from a guidance counselor. But what that basically does is it captures your academic, it's an academic snapshot, essentially. You're always submitting transcripts and things like that. And it basically verifies that you are in fact eligible to play. They have algorithms and all sorts of things to figure out, like, what's the ideal amount of core classes and things to do. And so in that sense, it's a good thing for them. And part of the NCAA thing is kind of a tricky one. So for us, we're in a very unique situation where we actually used to be part of NIRA. At one point, we left, I believe it was 2018, I believe. Our administration decided it was time to go. For us, we were, I mean, you can imagine, do the math, flying 27 people to the East Coast multiple times a year, while that wasn't really ever being reciprocated. So we were investing a ton of time and energy into a league that it's relatively insular. It's very Northeast, and it's great. It works for them. But for us, it was just like, what are we doing here? And so we pulled out of that and joined joined D1 Elite, which I'll reiterate what Roz and Billy said. Like it's next level, like for sure. I guarantee you take our teams versus the top NIRA teams, and we're going to come out on top the vast majority of the time. And it's a very, very tough league. And so it's, for those looking really to develop and push their rugby, if that's the main focus for you, then come this way for sure. If you get into Ivy League school, go to an Ivy League. I'm always going to encourage you to go to an Ivy. That's a career, that's a life-changing opportunity. Go for it. But if you're like, I don't really want to get into, a mortgage amount of debt to go get an education, it's like, well, we have a lot of other options here, and we can talk about that. But there are a lot of benefits, for the NCAA component, even just from a catastrophic injury standpoint. You have up to, I think it's $1 million in insurance as a secondary insurance to cover you if, God forbid, anything does happen to you. But there's also a lot of rules and regulations, even in season versus out of season training hours. So it's not for my benefit. Like I don't necessarily benefit from all these rules. It's all for the student athletes. And it's, you hear a lot of things in big time college sports, football and basketball about this backdoor thing, this underhanded thing. Like that's only at the highest. That's basically professional sports. Let's be honest. Like we're not that. So we have all these rules in place to ideally to protect our student athletes. And the last component that I would add on to it that I think is important to consider for those student athletes, because we've had some that are like, I don't really want to do the extra paperwork. It's not that much extra, but it's just like, do I really need to do this? For some people, no. Go where's best for you. But I would argue that one aspect when you do graduate and there's no rugby degree, so you got to get a real degree and then likely go on to have a job. I would argue on your resume that it's an important addition to it. When you're trying to separate yourself from the average person trying to apply for a job, if you see on the resume, this person was an NCAA rugby player, like, well, that kind of paints a story automatically. It's not to say like you can't do that for Lindenwood life for sure. Like, hey, I was a national championship winning rugby player. Like that paints its own story, right? But just in this country, I've learned that NCAA does mean something to a lot of people, and especially if you're looking for trying to go to graduate school, law school, start a career. That's a way you can definitely differentiate yourself.
I did it too. Okay, so that's awesome. So I think hopefully that, for the families that were wondering about that, we can certainly, I do a session literally just all about like what the different divisions are and what's the difference between club, and then there's varsity club, and then there's varsity, and what are all the differences. And one of the things I tell families all the time is that, rugby, and especially women's rugby in the US, is still so young compared to all those traditional sports of football and basketball and soccer, and it's still continuing to change. And even currently, as everyone knows, USA Rugby is in bankruptcy, so there's even more change of conferences and divisions. And certainly I think as 2021 continues on, we're going to see even more possible changes of, we used to be in this conference but now we're going to be in this conference, and things like that. So I think everyone just is, we're going to ask everyone to continue to be a little bit flexible and be open to kind of how things develop. One of the things that came up a lot in the questions that were submitted, and I don't know if we can answer this more like in a regular year, what it would look like versus what it looks like now. But if someone says, look, I want to go to your school, or I want to be recruited, I always get questions about timeline. What does the timeline normally look like? And what are those interactions? What do they look like? Because I always get, do you pay for them to travel to your campus, right? Are there official visits? Are there unofficial visits? Do they stay overnight? Like, what would that look like for a student who is being recruited by you? And Billy, maybe we'll start with you this time. And sorry, I'm just trying to set this up so it makes sense. Maybe we talk about it in like a normal year, what that would have looked like for everyone, because I'm hoping we go back to normal, at some point. And then I think for especially the juniors that are on the call, what does it look like for them? Because they're in it right now. So yeah, Billy, if you want to start us off, like what would it look like normally for you, like your recruiting process?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a perfect world, everybody on the phone or everybody on the call would probably start hearing from, recruits their junior year. Obviously, people get into it at all different times. And there is no deadline for us on our recruitment. It's rolling admissions. So, if there's somebody that is looking to attend in August and they message us in, May, if we're their top choice, we can make it happen. So that's one positive for our university setup is that rolling admissions. Again, going back to that perfect scenario, though, hearing from them earlier than that, coming junior year is probably an ideal scenario for us. My biggest suggestion would be, to email the head coach directly. Within that email would, be in a good background on themselves. I know one of the things that we look for is some sort of footage. And that can look like a lot of different things, especially right now with COVID, right? So I've chatted to a couple people that, don't have access to match footage. We're banking on this year to really get some good stuff to send us. And there's just no rugby going on. So, my recommendation, for those recruits out there is grab a friend, grab a family member, and just send us some footage on your skills, right? I mean, there's a lot of open skills that you can do that you don't need, during a game to just give us some sort of visual of, where you're currently at and kind of the potential that you have for the collegiate level. So I think that, whether it's match footage or whether it's just some of that close skill stuff, I think you've just got to be able to adapt and be able to send something over so we can get a visual of you. Other than that, for us personally at Lindenwood, we do have a free online application. So definitely doesn't hurt the wallet whatsoever to apply and kind of see, where you land as far as that financial aid package goes. For us right now, we have done official visits and unofficial visits throughout the fall with some stipulations. Anybody coming on campus does have to fill out, a symptom check form just to make sure, no fever, no symptoms of COVID before they're kind of walking around and touring. And then everybody has to stay off campus, right? So hotel or Airbnb or something like that. So we're just kind of taking extra precautions, but we are still doing visits. And we still plan on doing visits as well during the spring. So again, I think the biggest thing is, as you're looking, kind of narrowing down, top selections, starting to email head coaches, giving them a bit of background about yourself, not only as a player, but what you're interested in studying, right? Making sure that the schools that you're emailing, they have your intended major, unless it's kind of pretty pointless to send the email in the first place. So making sure that, academics are aligned as well. And then from there, just giving a bit about yourself so the coaches can get to know you.
Unmute here. Roz, what about you? In a normal year, what I bet I would speak for everyone here. It sounds like the earlier contact may be the better, right? Just at least getting in contact with you. But when is it really like recruitment crunch time? Like a usual like timeline. Like when do students really start feeling like, okay, we're in this process now? Not just kind of like random emails and stuff like that.
Similar to Billy, we do have rolling admissions, but I would say to have a plan in place, you want to start really solidifying it, senior year. So having done your research junior year and having really kind of looked at all the places that you're considering. I know some folks wait till the last minute. I know there's a normal distribution of how people do things, but in terms of like, we have housing scholarships, but I don't have an unlimited amount. And the earlier folks that go through the process and do the application and get admitted and commit, I can give them a housing scholarship. But those that wait till the last minute, they might not get that opportunity. So it really is early bird gets the worm on that. But in terms of a normal year, camps are huge for us. I've met players when they were in 8th grade, 9th grade, and been so impressed with them and kept in touch over years. Like Liberty's on this call right now. Hi, Liberty. But in that, I love the camp environment because they get to be on campus. They get to meet the coaching staff. We get to really get to know them for 3 or 4 days. So obviously we didn't have a camp this summer. We do have a winter showcase at the end of January. And it's limited and less interaction this year because of COVID, but we have a winter and a summer typically. So that would be that's a huge recruitment for us, because it is parceling out, are we the right academic fit first? And then we're a small campus, and really getting a feel for that person on, you really have to want to be here, because switching majors, you're still limited to what majors you might want to switch to. So it's really kind of deciding. And we have 4 times a year where we can fly people out for recruit weekends. We give up to $250 for flight reimbursement. We pick them up from the airport, give transportation, housing, food the whole time. In a normal year, they would stay in the dorm. They would train with the team. We did actually do that in the fall. They had to get COVID testing before staying with our team, before training with our team. They don't do full contact with the team, but they, played all the little games and ran around and did skills. So that's something that we do 4 times a year. And so again, we kind of have an unlimited amount of people we can bring in and give that to. So it's really kind of nice that, our budget, because that's coming from a different budget from athletics and the university, to bring in, if 100 people wanted to come see us, they could in a year. So that's pretty great to have that kind of thing at our university. Separately, there have been occasions where people couldn't make those weekends. And if they could get here, we might not have a flight reimbursement, but there's times that if it was a recruit that really was someone that I thought we needed to have here, we would certainly find the money, get them here, and do all those things. But because we offer those other 4 times a year, typically we just try to pair it with those weekends.
That makes a lot of sense. Trevor, anything different about your recruiting process? I mean, it sounds like for many programs, I think the crunch, or like when things really are kind of rolling, junior year, I think earlier is great, getting that contact, but when things start really becoming solid for most students, I think that junior year, that grade 11, is when you're like, okay, like we're going to be applying, and I'm really starting to think about where I'm going to live and those sorts of things. So it sounds like kind of that junior year, even like right now, if you're in grade 11, this is probably when things are really going to start moving forward. Trevor, anything different about your process, or anything special that students or parents should be aware of?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. Obviously, recruiting is generally recruiting. There's some nuances there that are different. With the NCAA component, I think signing day is typically like early November, and that's of the senior year. So you can apply, get in, give us a verbal commitment, but then generally speaking, and that once late fall is generally we can actually formally sign and announce, which is a little bit different than some, I suppose. But the process is relatively the same. We can do unofficial visits, which are just 24-hour, one-day visits, or official visits, which that's a 48-hour visit. Again, give us some heads up on that. Don't just show up and be like, hey, I'm here for 2 days. Like, give us a heads up so we can get your hotel, get your meals covered, and things like that. So the process is, it's definitely a two-way street. I think what's kind of been touched on a little bit that I would absolutely implore every student athlete here is, no matter what you're considering, like no matter what, you probably listen to this and be like, man, this sounds like the life for me. Like, I want to go and be a varsity rugby player and go play at the highest level. I'm like, yeah, I hope so. That's we need those people, right? But the reality is our environments are not for the average person, to come in here and just kind of kick your feet up, because there's a lot of people who are more concerned about getting, the Instagram headshot and some free gear than they are actually being high level rugby players. And so I would encourage anybody, parents and student athletes, ask yourself what it is that you're seeking out of your experience. Think about, what is your major? What do you want to major? Do they even offer the major that I want? Do they have the academics that I want? Do they have the facilities that I'm looking for? Is the location that the university is located in, do I want to live in that area for 4 to 5 years? And then you got to think about the direction that these universities could potentially take you in. There's no wrong or right answer. It's just it's up to you. And so you've got to start building a criteria of what it is you're looking for. Then it'll help narrow down the decision for you. Then obviously come out for a visit. Like, we're always encouraging student athletes to go, like, yeah, come visit us, and then go visit Lindenwood, go visit Life, go visit Penn State, see what's the best thing for you. Because I would argue that I'm assuming it's true. Like, we're not going to try and deceive you to try and like trick you to get here. And they're like, surprise. Like, we're going to give you all the answers we can. We're going to try and be as transparent as possible, and then give you all the information so you can make a decision that's the best thing for you. because at the end of the day, the gravity of that situation cannot be overlooked. It's a huge, huge decision about where you go, and it will change the course of your life. I think generally speaking, no matter which way, it's going to be positive, but it is going to be different, and you need to kind of start building that criteria for yourself.
That's great. Actually, what you just mentioned leads me into, there was a question here about, maybe we'll approach this question more of a non-pandemic time, but what would a typical day or week look like when you're in season? What could students expect, right? I love that kind of preemptive, like, look, this is hard work, right? I hear this all the time. You're like, oh my gosh, that girl's so lucky she gets to play. I'm like, she's lucky because she works really hard. Like, she's making her own luck. It's not just she shows up and it's there. You know what? And maybe I'm gonna, because we're gonna start running out of time. So maybe I'm gonna assume everyone is similar, but I don't know if Trevor, if you just want to, why don't you answer, and then if anyone has something different, but like generally speaking, like a typical day or week for one of your athletes, what might that look like?
Sure. So I'll go with in-season training because that's where we are now. Out of season, you have 8-hour training, 8 hours in a week you can do. In season, 20 hours. We never go that high, but that's what we're capped at, just so we're aware. So just looking at a typical week, you lift weights 3 times a week for an hour at a time. We train 4 days, sometimes 5 days a week for about an hour, hour and a half at that time. So this spring's a little bit different. I'll give you just a basic day. So like Monday, for example, lift at 7 a.m. We'll have skills at 8 for about 30 minutes or so. We go to class from about 9 to about 2 or so. And then we'll go to training for about an hour. And then they might have to do rehab or homework, study hall, things like that. On a Tuesday, for example, again, class in the morning until early afternoon. We'll film at about 1:30, about 30, 45 minutes max. And then we're out on the training pitch, getting after it. So you can quickly see between class and training and your rehab and all the other things that go into it, your schedule does fill up, but there's absolutely time to be a normal student and have a social life and work a part-time job if you really need it.
Anything different, or Billy, Roz, like similar for you as well, kind of a typical day, week? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would say it's that's pretty similar. Just to add on, and I know the other coaches have access to some of this stuff as well, but just for us as well, just making sure that we're monitoring an athlete's training loads. So just how we plan our week from a performance standpoint, to making sure that we're peaking on Saturdays, right? So for us specifically, we do use Catapult Sports GPS systems, right? We're tracking meters, we're tracking high-speed accelerations. We're making sure that players that are rostered on Monday are ready to perform at their best ability for a Saturday. So for us, Monday is usually a pretty light day with install, and Tuesday will kind of be our high speed meters day. And we'll just track that and be able to post that, create some competitions out of it between the team. And then I'm sure we all kind of use some sort of video analysis system, whether that's recording our training sessions or our matches, and just kind of going over those post-match or pre-match based on, what footage we have, and just making sure that the things we're doing on a weekly basis are going to set our players up for success, not only when we play each other, but also when they continue their rugby post-college, right? Whether that's at a WPL program or, that's for USA Rugby or their international students and they go overseas. We want to put them in scenarios that they're used to using these resources, this equipment, this video analysis, these GPS units. So it's all familiar to them, right? And they're able to be confident in what they do and when they go out there and attend camps, and not just making a camp, right, but being successful when you're there. So
yeah, wonderful. I we're touching a little bit on recruitment. I'm seeing some questions in the chat box as well. It might apply for pre-pandemic and also even now, but like what can students do to stand out? I'm sure attending camps and those sorts of things would have been great. If they can't do it, what happens if they don't have film? They didn't have a season this last year. And then if they do in the future, they have a game or season, are there certain things you're looking for in that film, or like when they're at your camp? Like, what are those things that Roz, like you said, like they really stand out to you? You're like, I want to stay in touch with that athlete. What was it about that athlete? Was it purely just their athleticism, or was it other things that really stood out to you? That was a lot of questions. Sorry. You can like pick parts of it. to answer.
Honestly, it's actually changed a little bit for me over time, having done this now several years. I think early on, everyone knew that I saw a fast person. I was like, that one. And so that was kind of early on, and willingness, obviously, you know, having an academic fit is always number one. And then I go and look at, I'm not going to go after a player that wants to be an engineer, but has the best box kick I've ever seen. Right. So there's a certain part of that. And some of it is team player in their ability in the contact area, defense in particular, tackling, rucking. And if you're willing to play good defense, you're a team player, because there's no, people love to score tries. And if you're only worried about scoring tries, that doesn't necessarily make you a good team player. And if you're unwilling to tackle, right, then it kind of shows kind of your work ethic and both sides of the ball. But also a huge part, because we've grown as a team and recruitment, it's not as difficult, I'd say. We get a lot of interest at Life University, is really looking at academics and character have become really central and standing out. And that has nothing to do with looking what they're doing on the field, because I always tell recruits this, that I had a number of All-Americans, and now even an Eagle, 15s and 7s, who never played rugby till she stepped on campus. Right. So came in never having played high school rugby, but her character is what differentiated her to where she just had a heart of gold, was coachable, like all of these things that you can't see on film. And I know that's difficult. That's why our camp system's so important to me, is to really get to know folks. But if you have, I've had coaches be very honest with me. And that's another thing. Coaches have said, we had problems with her. She was hard to deal with. She was difficult with teammates. And that can kill a team. And that can kill, and we have a responsibility to our teams to have people that will get along and be a very good fit. So it's really kind of, I can look at this person who has a beautiful 20-meter pass, but I can coach that as well, And so she might have a great 20-meter pass, but she was really awful to her teammates. Right. So that's the thing that's really become really central now to, I can have a recruiting class of 20, but now I'm at, maybe I just want 6 or 7, 6 or 7 really good ones. And I don't have a limit. I'm lucky. I don't have a limit on financial scholarships, to be honest. Like the person I'm talking about came in and, having never played rugby, on $0 left, and we were paying 90% of her tuition. And I've gone beyond that, where a player was so good, we paid for her housing, we paid for her full tuition. All that was left was her buying her meal plan, $2,700 a year, So I can, that's what's so important, is finding the right ones, but also not it being, what are their skill set right now?
I got something to add on.
Yeah, go for it.
Ross. And it's a question in the open as well, just regards to film for recruitment. One of the biggest things that I noticed, and I'm sure other coaches notice this as well, is just having some holistic film as far as what your skill set is. I think it's fantastic if you've got this, your favorite song is blasting on there, but if it's 4 minutes straight of you scoring unopposed tries, it really doesn't tell us much about you as a player, right? So, my biggest recommendation is, again, even if you don't have a ton of tackling, even if you don't have a ton of pass catch stuff, those are closed skills that you can go out and do with one person. And that really just gives us a broader view of your potential at the collegiate level, right? So my biggest advice for those people putting together those highlight tapes is just to really vary it so we can see you as an overall player, right? Whether that's defense, attack, transition. We want to see, do you have a specialty skill? Can you drop kick real well? Can you kick off a tee real well? Include that stuff, right? Scoring tries is fantastic. We'll get around to that. And that can be a super strength of yours, but don't allow it to be your only strength that you're showing us.
Trevor, what about you? What might you be looking for, or any tips for students that, actually Billy touched on it a little bit, those players that don't have a season, didn't have a season, don't have any film? what could they do to catch your eye right now?
For sure. Yeah. And this is a thing that's popping up quite a bit. And I genuinely feel bad for everybody across the world, but especially recruits trying to get recruited right now. Like, hey coach, like I didn't have any film. What do you want me to do? So to directly answer that one, I would say like anything. Do you play other sports? Do you have film from like ninth grade basketball? Do you have film of you running agility drills? Can you show me some just basic catch pass stuff? Like literally anything is better than nothing. But I will say, like, even if I know we have some younger players here as well who are, hopefully will get back on the field here soon enough and be able to provide ample film. It's never too early to start in that. And, I like highlight reels, don't get me wrong. Like, it's a good way to pique our interest, but anybody can look good in 5-second bursts. So, I want to see, okay, show me the highlight reel. That's great. But then I want to see game film. So like get on your coaches or whatever, your parents, hey, even if it's just a few games, I want to see what you're doing off the ball. Are they the person who like when they only run when they have the ball in their hands and then they're just standing around, hands on the hips, yelling at their teammates? Like, well, I don't really want that person, to be honest. I need a team player. As Roz was touching on, like character will go a long way in this. Obviously academics are another thing. Like, listen, like we're not only pursuing 4.0 students, but there are correlations and tendencies with people who are academic achievers. There's just consistency. Consistency is going to beat out high levels of talent that fluctuates constantly. Because ultimately we recruit our own headaches, and I'd like to reduce my headaches as much as I possibly can. So we've had some outstanding players that came through here, like for camps and that, and we're all about it. And they either didn't make a good impression on some of our players because we get feedback from them on their visits. We do ask them because ultimately, the players have to deal with them more than we have to often. So it's like, do you want this person as a teammate? And all of a sudden we're starting to get feedback like, nah, coach, they said this or did that. Like, oh, that's a red flag. Well, we don't really want to bring that into our environment. So keeping in mind, like when you come out for a visit, you're obviously seeing if you want to come be a part of this program, but we're also seeing if we should bring this person in to our environment as well. So it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I think the character piece is becoming, maybe I think when I first started Rutgers Edge in like 2012, the idea of like thinking about rugby as a part of your college search was so like bizarre. Everyone's like, who would ever do that? And I think it's amazing that there are students out there now, and this is the pool of players is growing, and that's great, right? It's great for the game of rugby, especially for women's rugby. I think it's awesome, like just to see where it's already come from. But I think what happens then too is we have more competition. One of the things I was hoping someone would touch on as well is when students start this contact piece and they start communicating with you, what are some things that they should be aware of, right? With in terms of when they're emailing you, if they're now on Zoom calls with you, are there some tips you would give them? I just wrote like a little blog thing for my newsletter about checking emails, because I literally had a student where she wasn't checking her emails. I'm like, what's going on? And I had her share her screen because obviously we're virtual, and she had like 1,100 unread emails. I'm like, whoa, what is, she's like, I don't know, I'm just so overwhelmed. But a huge part of recruiting, and I'm assuming you guys can answer here, a lot of it will go through emails. So if they're not answering your emails, I'm wondering what you think of that, or tell me a little bit about what communication, some tips about that communication and what you would recommend that they do.
Trevor kind of mentioned like a correlation, right, in terms of personal responsibility. And so now that I've done this for years, I've seen that when parents have done too much and parents have done too much for that student athlete, and I'm like, are they really interested? Is this really what they want to do? And, when they've gotten to college and made the transition, they can't get to where they're supposed to be, classes on time, lifts on time. And so that personal responsibility, so now I know it's a red flag. If a person's not responsive, if a person, is not doing and someone else is doing it for them, those are certainly red flags in terms of whether that person will be able to manage everyday responsibilities. So that's one of them.
Yeah, just to touch base on what Ross said there as well. I highly encourage, especially for initial communications, to have a family member on those emails as well when reaching out, right? But that doesn't mean that student athlete recruit can't be, self-advocating, right? So, taking lead in those emails, making sure that, you know, a lot of the information we're getting is coming from them as well, right? And then when we get together on that Zoom call and start getting to know them more, you know, having family members on it well, but we want people that are able to answer their own emails in a timely manner, right? I mean, that's just kind of like a basic, you know, adulting skill that, you know, being able to do that and time manage at a D1 collegiate student athlete level is just you know, a core skill that we would want. And just real quick, not to backtrack at all, Karen, but just talking about that varsity, I think it's apparent that, you know, the recruitment support is an area where varsity is different than club as well. You know, all the coaches on here mentioned that having the ability to have some funds to fly kids in or put kids in hotels or pay for some meals is, you know, obviously a big difference than club teams. And you know, the coaches on this call specifically having the ability to do that, I'm pretty sure that, you know, that's probably rare compared to a lot of other programs, no matter what division that they're in. So that's a big advantage for us. And Trevor touched on transparency, and I think that's a really important word when it comes to the recruiting process, and one that's a bit undervalued. And I think one of the reasons that I encourage everybody to start this process their junior year is because this takes time, right? I mean, at the end of the day, most of the student athletes that we're talking to that are in high school are dual sport athletes, right? So they have very busy athletic seasons. They're prepping for ACTs or SATs. They're trying to go through their AP or core classes. So scheduling visits isn't just like you've got these like free 3 months, what should I do? Right. So starting in your junior year and scheduling these visits is really important because at the end of the day, I mean, all our schools' websites and every school website out there is going to show you these fantastic static pictures, right? They're going to have this great photo album of this beautiful tree or, you know, this beautiful brick building. But until you get there, until you drive a couple miles around campus and off campus, you really don't have a feel for the environment that you're going to be in for the next 4 to 5 years of your you know, academic and athletic career. So my biggest encouragement from the whole recruitment process is get on site, check out the environment around the school and inside the school and the buildings. And not only that, but I would suggest, you know, to anybody to ask a coach to watch one of their practices, right? I know Ross has people participate, which is great, but just watch a training session. I mean, people to me that commit without knowing what level of commitment they're going into is just kind of a shot in the dark, and you're just kind of crossing your fingers that it hopes out, right? If you're expecting really high level rugby and you're going to a really small school down in, you know, state XYZ and you've never seen their training, well, you might be in for a harsh reality, right? So that's my biggest encouragement is I think there's a lot of amazing programs across D1 Elite, across NIRA, across all the divisions that are out there, and it's continuing to grow, which is great. But get in person, get on site, and ask to watch a training session because that's the environment you're going to be in for the next couple of years, and you want to make sure you enjoy it and it's the right level for you.
Yeah, so I've got a couple more minutes left here, and I am going to end it on time. I was just going to mention something that you know, for the students and the families that are in the process of trying to figure out fit. The really lucky thing is we are in this internet age, right? And I'm like, look, you're interested in these schools, their games are online. Go watch Lifers Lindenwood. You know, see if that level of play is you know what you want. I mean, I've certainly had players, you know, look at games and they're like, oh, like that's maybe too much, and I think that's okay, right? No athlete wants to be that one that says that, but at the same time, like the college process should be it's your individual choice. You know, if that you don't want to commit the amount of time to rugby, you know, kind of like what Trevor was talking about, and you're like, look, like I want to have a lot of free time. I want to have a lot of fun, you know, and rugby is not something I want to commit. That's okay, and it's better that you know now versus go down this whole road, have all these conversations, have all these meetings, and then you're like, oh, you know, it's not right for me. The only other last thing I was going to mention, I tend to have this happen with a lot of female athletes, is actually the opposite, which is also the feeling of, I don't think I'm good enough to play for one of these programs. And I think the other thing, you know, I can see, I think Roz mentioned, or Billy did to someone, where you are now is not where you're going to be. All of these coaches can absolutely coach you up to that next level, as long as you're willing and able, and don't take yourself out of the process just because you're a little unconfident, you know, about it. You know, basically put your name out there, throw your name in the hat, and see what happens. But every single one of these coaches has worked with players that have either never played, or, you know, only had one or 2 years, and they can get you up to that level. So I am going to start wrapping it up. I wanted to let everyone know, if you registered ahead of time for this session, I'll be sending all of your information to the coaches, and then coaches, I'll be sending all of your information to all the attendees as well, so you all can communicate and connect as well. I'll also add on a lot of resources for all of the families in terms of, you know, I have a little list of things if you were going to do a visit, things you might want to consider and things you might want to ask, questions for you to look at, and just other things that I think are really important in terms of finding the best fit. Because at the end of the day, it's really about you. I was actually going through a bunch of my old like articles, and one of them's like, you know, like when you have those cleats that are like too small, or you have cleats that are too big, even if they're like the fanciest, prettiest, brand new technology, if they don't fit, you're not going to wear them, right? There, you're just going to have blisters all day. So you do want to make sure, you know, if you're in the Northeast, and you're like, I never want to go to the West Coast, Central Washington's not a great fit for you. You know, you're gonna be, if you're like, I really want to be able to see my family every weekend, it's not a great fit, you know. And so just kind of thinking about, and Roz mentioned, you want to be an engineer, life may not be is not the right fit, right? It doesn't have your major. So really thinking through what is best for me, put the blinders on, right? Like what is best for me, not what's best for my teammate, my best friend who lives down the road. It's got to be what's best for you. And all these coaches, the wonderful thing I tell everyone all the time, so different from other sports, everyone here is here to help you. You know, if you start having a conversation with Roz and it's like, you know, this isn't a great fit, she might say, hey, you know, go talk to Coach Richards, go talk to Coach Nicholas. They might be a better fit for you. Everyone really, at the end of the day, the wonderful thing about, you know, rugby in the US is we want it to grow. We want you to keep playing. So whether it's with their program or someone else's, they are going to help you. So please feel free to reach out to them. I just want to take a minute to thank all the coaches for joining me this evening. I really, really appreciate your time. I will hopefully see you on the pitch sometime soon. And I will send out a recording, and I hope everyone stays happy, stays healthy, and I will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I appreciate it.